afternoon, everybody. I know that Coach Tomlin and Art Rooney spoke about the 2020 season. I'd just like to offer a few of my own thoughts. It was a unique year for a lot of reasons. Football aside, we all had to deal with the COVID, and again, that wasn't unique to us or our industry. From a season standpoint, it was a different year as well. To come out of the gates as good as we did and hit that 11-0 mark, only to fall in the first round of the playoffs, it was very disappointing. We need to be judged on how we finished the season and not about how we did during the season. Even when we were at the 11-0 mark, I never really had a comfort level because I knew that we would judge ourselves and would be judged accordingly from the outside about how we did in the playoffs. So acknowledging that and moving on and trying to remedy that, as we always like to talk about after the Super Bowl, we're all at that 0-0 mark, and we got to start moving toward 2021. Along those lines, we're preparing for free agency. Before I do that, I would like to acknowledge both Marquise Ponce and Vance McDonald and thank each of them for their contributions to us and wish them nothing but the best in whatever their next phase of life is. Moving into the free agency world, we knew this was going to be a big class. We have 19 free agents, and then you add in Marquise and Vance not being with us next year. We knew this would be a big class that we would have to deal with. We knew it would be a challenging class that we'll have to deal with as well, moving into a normal cap situation. We're anticipating it not to be a normal cap situation. That'll be determined as we move closer to the start of the league year, and we'll deal with it accordingly. As far as the combine is still up for discussion. Actually on a combine committee. We're trying to move closer to what we will be able to do, when and where. As we stand right now, it'll be a medical only for select players. And again, that process will hopefully get finalized here in the next week or so. Once we move from the combine, we get into the pro days. The pro days will, again, like the combine, be different. We will focus on whatever the schools mandate and how they're mandated by their own states. We'll attend as many of those as we possibly can in preparation for the draft. But again, like the combine and the pro days will be judged and worked from as safe a manner as we possibly can. As we stand right now, we have 7 picks in this year's draft. We hope to get a few more compensatory picks. That'll be determined over the next few weeks. And, again, we hope to come away with more than 7 as we move into the draft. We get through the draft. We want to move into hopefully as normal as possible return to a calendar. We found out that we're in the Hall of Fame game, but again, we want to be able to move into the spring and hopefully get in our OTAs, our mini camps, and move into a normal training camp. So that's where we stand right now. We'll take this one step at a time and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
First one, Mark Bowley, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Doing great, Mark.
Hey, can you give us an update on where you stand with Ben Roethlisberger? You met with him? Do you want him back? Does he want to be back? And what needs to be done for him to come back?
Yeah, as we sit here today, Ben is a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He met with Art Rooney. He met with Coach Tomlin. He met with myself shortly after the season ended. He reiterated that to us, that he wants to continue to play. And we told him, quite frankly, we have to look at this current situation. Art Rooney addressed that with Ben's current cap number, some adjustment will have to be made. And we're not negotiating as we sit here and answer this question. Ben Roethlisberger is on the team. Ben Roethlisberger did a lot of really good things last year, and we anticipate that he could still do some good things moving forward. So hopefully there's a way that we can try to figure out and do what's best for the organization and do what's best for Ben. And hopefully he'll be able to see that and feel the same way we do, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, not only with Ben, but just with the whole unrestricted free agent class and our whole cap situation as well.
Mike Pursuta.
Hey, Kev, you mentioned a moment ago you're judged by how the season ends, not what happens during the season. Since the Packers Super Bowl, you've won 3 playoff games. How do you view that? How do you react to that? And does that imply that there's something you guys need to change fundamentally?
Yeah, the way we react to it, it's not good enough. Any season that ends without a Super Bowl is never good enough. And when I look at it from my viewpoint, I know that the job I did in putting whatever that 53-man roster was in each of those given years, it wasn't good enough. And that's where I will start. And, you know, Coach Tomlin and I will always try to work towards that goal. That will never change, no matter what our makeup is. But it's our job, my job specifically, to put a 53-man roster together that isn't coming up short at the end of a season. I think, as I've mentioned before, you know, players either regress or progress. I still think we got enough players on the progressive side of things, and hopefully we can add some more from the outside and retain some guys that helped us win some games last year. But I think you have to look at it realistically and be honest with yourself and say, well, the team we put together last year wasn't good enough and we have to be better.
Jerry Dulac.
Kev, good afternoon. How would you describe what needs to be done with the running game? I mean, does it need a complete overhaul of scheme, technique, and personnel?
Again, I'll look at it from the personnel standpoint. And the group of guys we had last year, the offensive line, the running backs, the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, it did not produce a good running game. I think schematically that's up for the coach, and that's up to Coach Tomlin to figure that. And my input would be, okay, Coach, if we need to do certain things schematically, these are the types of players that may be available to help us achieve that. Again, it's a collective effort by, you can't say the runners weren't good enough or the quarterback wasn't good enough or the line wasn't good enough. To put out the kind of running game we did, nobody was good enough. And again, that's a collective effort. And we need to be better, quite honestly, just in reference to what Mike was talking about. We need to be able to finish. And I think having a strong running game helps teams finish in that time of year.
Dale Lawley.
Kevin, you talked about one of your quarterbacks. In terms of Mason Rudolph, what is your confidence level in him moving forward? And if you guys aren't able to work something out with Ben, could he be your starting quarterback in 2021?
You know, I can even go back to 2019, you know, when Mason started 8 games and he finished the season 5-3, or finished those 8 games as a 5-3 record. The game he started this year, it was probably the best game he's played for us. And unfortunately, we came up a little bit short, but it was very encouraging to see Mason play like he did in a tough situation. You know, Cleveland was desperate to win. It was at their home field, and we came within 2 points of beating him. So I think that was encouraging for us. And, you know, hopefully we get to see Mason take some more steps in whatever role he has or whatever playing time he gets, be it preseason or regular season or whatever. But it was encouraging to see him in that Cleveland game.
Brooke Pryor.
Kevin, continuing on the quarterback discussion, when we spoke with Art, he said that the quarterback room needs to add someone else. And I believe that was even after you guys added Dwayne Haskins. Is that something that needs to happen regardless of what happens with Ben? And how do you look at adding a quarterback? Is that something that you could address in the draft or free agency? Where do you kind of stand on building that room?
You know, since we drafted Ben back in 2004, we've been fortunate not to be picking very high where those marquee quarterbacks are usually available. And we've tried to add players at that position. I've said it before that when Ben was a younger player, we always wanted that veteran presence behind him. As he crossed over into that veteran status, we always tried to have a younger player behind him that may be on the rise. A player like a Mason Rudolph or Joshua Dobbs, now that Josh was back with us last year. A player like Dwayne Haskins, a very talented player that was drafted very high by Washington, and it didn't work out for him. There was a change in regimes. He was cut, but it was a no risk pickup for us. He's a very young, talented player, and we'll find out more about him once we get him in here and get him out on the field. So does that mean we can't continue to add to that position? Absolutely not. Nothing we will do in this free agency period will preclude us from continuing to look at that and add a player at that position.
Joe Rutter.
Yeah, hi, Kevin. I'm back to one more thing on Ben. You said, work has to be done and that he has met with certain people, but maybe I misunderstood you, but isn't he supposed to meet again to kind of finalize and get that out of the way? And do you know where things stand in that regard?
Yeah, when we met previously, we all agreed that, look, we'll get together at some point once we get further down the road and have a better understanding about what free agency is, what the cap might be. And, from a personnel standpoint, we will have a better idea about what type of players will be available to us in free agency and how we might want to address either adding our own or adding someone from those classes. And we'll have a much better feel, and we are getting a much better feel on the draft class. So all that comes together collectively, and we can have a better idea about what our team will be in 2021 and how can he be a part of it and make that group as good as it can be. So it's a ongoing process. This doesn't involve him, but it involves the players around him. And I'm sure he's going to want to see what type of team we can keep together under our current situations. And hopefully we can all make the correct adjustments to keep that group together as much as possible.
Jim Colony.
Yeah, Kevin, you mentioned, obviously the potential loss of a whole bunch of free agents. Art had said something along the lines of you may have to start rethinking the way you guys do business. I think it was based more on the pandemic and the conditions now. But do you guys have to rethink the position of not renegotiating or extending players in the middle of a season in an attempt to make sure you hang on to some of these guys instead of facing so many free agency defections?
No, we're very comfortable with that approach. It's been much more successful for us than unsuccessful. I think we will continue to do that. Again, once we start playing a season, our only focus should be the upcoming game with the ultimate of winning a Super Bowl. When individual negotiations are going on during a season, we view that as a distraction, and we'll never let that be part of it as we try to put together a team and a philosophy as to getting the best team out there. So we're comfortable with that, and I don't anticipate that changing.
Will Graves.
Kevin, I got about 17 questions, but I'll stick to just one. What is your contract is up after the draft. I believe that's correct, right? So, what is your status, and sort of have you talked to Art about staying on beyond, into the future a little bit longer?
Yeah, fortunately, the organization is willing to look at me on a year-to-year basis. And quite honestly, that's how I look at myself and evaluate myself. How did I do this past year? We didn't do it good enough. And that's the evaluation I'm making of myself. And Art and I will discuss that, at the appropriate time. Right now, the appropriate thing to do is to focus on this team, what we need to do in this given moment. As you mentioned, my contract's not up until the end of May, so we got plenty of time to try to sort through that. And again, fortunately, they're willing to work with me on a year-to-year basis. And quite honestly, that's all I deserve, because I think we have to continue to prove ourselves each and every year.
Didi Kinkabala.
Hi, Kevin. You said that, I'm going to go back to Ben, I'm sorry, but you said that in your conversations with him, you openly said, we quite frankly have to look at the situation. Is the situation only a fiscal one, and can you make it work with the cap? Or is the situation whether he's still the right fit, whether he matches the offense you want to run philosophically, whether he's the best bet for the future of the organization as you grow and perhaps move into a new era?
All of the above. I mean, it is a, cap first and foremost, because we'll have to be in compliance with the salary cap once the new league year starts. That's first and foremost. And what kind of team can we keep together or put together under whatever those cap restrictions are? We know we're up against it. We knew we were going to be up against it in a normal year, and we were willing to do the things we did via free agency extensions, renegotiations, etc., to get where we were going to be comfortable and trying to make ourselves whole again in 2021. Obviously, we were all dealt a loss through the pandemic, and we have to deal with that accordingly, and we will. And it's not unique to us. It's, there's probably 2/3 of the league is facing similar issues. So how that all comes together in the next few weeks, we'll continue to look at it. But what it is first and foremost financially, because we have to be in compliance. And then we're making guesstimates on as to what we can do to put the best team together for our sake, for Ben's sake. What kind of team can he anticipate being around him if we decide that we can move forward together?
Bill Marciani.
Kevin, with no combine in terms of workouts, the pro days, typically how many do you usually attend a year? Will that increase this year because there will no be combine with workouts?
Yeah, the pro days it's an ongoing process of trying to figure out when pro days are. Some states may restrict that, some colleges may restrict it. The NFL has already put in place that only three representatives from each team can attend a given pro day, but albeit under the restrictions that the colleges will place on it. There may be some schools that say, even though the league allows 3, you can only have 1. In a normal year, we're usually attending 15 to 20 pro days. I don't anticipate us being able to do as many this year, but Coach and I will be very selective on when and where we can get out, and hopefully we can still get to the premium ones where there's as many good players as possible on a given team, and try to cover that as best we can. We'll get it covered comprehensively with all the scouts and some of the assistant coaches, but as far as Coach and I, we will be more select this year, only because we have to be.
Alan Saunders.
And Kevin, you mentioned Marquise Pouncey retiring. You also have Alejandro Villanueva, that's a free agent. You made a change at offensive line coach. How much is rebuilding that offensive line a priority for what you're doing this offseason? And what are the steps you feel like you guys have available to you to rectify that? Is it just the draft? Is re-signing some of your free agents a possibility, and our external free agents a possibility?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Al's a free agent. Matt Filer's a free agent. Marquise has retired. Zach Banner's coming off an ACL. So it is an uncertain group that we have up front. And again, I don't know where the free agency part will go for both Matt and Al. We know Marquise won't be back with us. So how that comes together, it will be ongoing. The draft itself it's stronger at the tackle position than it is at the interior. Center and guard traditionally is not a very strong group. In any draft, the tackles are unusually deep this year. So I think we can add players through the draft, and, hopefully we'll be able to do some type of business in free agency, and we're always going to look at our own players first.
Rich Walsh.
Kevin, I wanted to ask about some of the injuries. You touched on Zach Banner and see how these guys are doing, specifically Devin Bush and how his rehab's going. And is everything on track for those 2 guys, and Dupree and some of the other bigger injuries you had?
Yes, both Bud and Devin are here. They're in and out. I actually just saw Devin on my way down to do this session, and Devin's doing good with his rehab. Bud has been doing good from the onset. So hopefully those guys are up and running for their own sake. We know Devin will be back with us. We don't know where Bud will end up, as he's an unrestricted free agent. But we just hope for their health, and all indications are right now that they will be full speed at some point in 2021.
Jenna Harner.
Kevin, you mentioned kind of the uncertainty surrounding free agency, surrounding the cap situation, surrounding the draft. But in your mind, in this organization's mind, what is the top priority for you guys this offseason?
Top priority is not sitting here talking about losing in the first round of the playoffs. How we go about that, I can't say we have one singular focus on how that will come together, because one decision may preclude another. One may eliminate another. It's just a continual, ongoing process of trying to put together the best 90 players that will give us the best 53, so that we don't sit here talking about that. We mentioned the offensive line. We probably have the biggest losses in that position group. So maybe that's one area, but it's one of several areas that we'll continue to look at.
Mark Caboli.
Hey, Kevin, you guys moved over Matt Canada from quarterback coach to OC. I mean, will he be allowed to do, for a lack of better terms, the full Matt Canada offense, the motions, the jet sweeps and all that stuff? Or will it be a watered down version of that to maybe accommodate the personnel?
Yeah, I think it'll probably be both. And Coach and I have talked about that, because I've asked Coach Tomlin, with Matt taking over, will we be looking at different players differently? And, Coach is always going to talk about what we have and how we can adapt what they do to what we currently have. Maybe as we move into, the future down the road, and we're deciding on a wide receiver type or a running back type or a quarterback type or an offensive lineman type, we may shift as we evolve and learn what Coach Canada's offense is about. We've seen it work in the college ranks, and we saw the types of players that he used in different roles. So can we adjust to that as we go on? Yes. Will we adjust immediately? No, I know Coach Tomlin will do what our players can do the best under Coach Canada's offense and the schematics that he puts together. And over time, I think we can adjust it. But right out of the gate, it's hard to make those types of adjustments.
Try to get to a few more here. Jerry Dulac.
Kev, at what point, we're talking about Mason, do you think about redoing his deal or extending his deal? And just as a second point too, is bringing back Bud a real possibility?
Well, to your first point, we're never going to talk about an individual negotiation. I think Mason wants to prove who he is. I know he'd like to play more. Last year, he only got to play one game because we had no preseason. Hopefully, we get back up to a full preseason, whatever it is. Again, we know we're playing the Hall of Fame game. So I know Mason wants to get out and continue to prove that he can play at this level. I think that's first and foremost. We're never going to eliminate a great player like Bud Dupree, because we don't know what Bud's market is, and Bud doesn't know what his market is at this point. I think it's pretty common for not only our free agents, but the whole free agency group. Until we get a solid cap number, we don't know. And we just have to adjust and know that he might be a possibility, he might not be. Only time will tell with that, but would love to be able to keep a Bud Dupree, because Bud's a special player, but Bud and TJ together are as a special group.
Joe Rudder.
Yeah, Kevin, with your cap situation and not knowing what the number is going to be this year, does that make it harder? Or, is there any chance you could use a tag this year on any of your free agents?
I would say it's doubtful that we'll be able to use a tag. Again, when we say we don't know what the cap is, what we always try to do is prepare for the worst situation. Right now, we know the cap can't go below 175 million based on the CBA. So we'll always work in that mindset, and we'll play different scenarios and put together different scenarios in the event that is what we're dealing with, and we'll try to guesstimate on what a certain player may cost us, be it our own player or be it someone else. And we'll always weigh that and measure that against what might be available to us in a draft. as I said, if a position in the draft is very strong and you feel good about being able to get a player in the draft that might take you away from signing a free agent or extending your own free agent. So it's it just continue. I hate to keep saying that, but it's the truth that we have to continually monitor this and work at it every day because it does change actually daily.
Two more, Brooke Pryor.
Yeah, Kevin, you just mentioned TJ Watt a second ago. Given the cap constraints that you guys are facing and the needs that you have, especially on an offensive line, is it realistic to think that you could be in pursuit of JJ Watt? I know TJ and Derek have both been vocal about wanting all the Watt brothers together. Is that realistic? Have you guys had any preliminary conversations with JJ or with TJ about JJ?
Yeah, we never talk about an individual potential negotiation. It's my job and our personnel department's job to know when a player gets cut and who that player is and how could he possibly fit into this. We anticipate a lot of players getting cut in the next few weeks as teams come to the realization of what the cap may be. And for each and every player that gets cut, we will put those players into the free agency group that we know have their contracts coming to an end, and we continue to make those adjustments. So TJ is our guy. Derek is with us. Whether or not we can ever add anybody, I'd hate to talk about it because it would be just speculation at this point.
Actually, two more provided they're short. Jim Colony.
Yeah, Kevin, you were pretty upfront about evaluating your performance, saying that you haven't done a good enough job. How would you evaluate Mike Tomlin's performance?
The same way as my own. We weren't good enough. And when I say that, I mean we. Coach can only do so much with the players that he's given, and I can only provide him what I think is the right fits. And again, when it works, great. When it doesn't, we both know that we weren't good enough, and that will always be a we. And with myself in the forefront of those players that we put out there were a first team playoff loss, and we recognize that isn't good enough. Mike Tomlin has done so much more good in this league than not good. And Mike is a excellent NFL head coach. He's won Super Bowls. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to two. Have we had the success we want to have recently? No. And that's a collective we, and we'll just continue to work to make sure that doesn't happen.
Final one, Aditi, go ahead.
Kevin, I'm going to go back to Ben. A year ago, you were incredibly bullish. You said you expected him to play better than perhaps he had in previous years. Just now, you said you anticipate that he could still do some nice things. If the decision is made that perhaps it's time for Ben to be done, is that all three of you, Art and Mike, all have to agree on that? Is that up to just one person, or ultimately is it truly only up to Ben to decide whether he walks away? Can you talk us through that?
Sure. And going back on Ben's 2020, he really did do some special things. In the beginning of the year, we talked about watching what he was doing because he was doing some incredible feats as we were building that 11-0 record. A lot of that was him performing at crucial times in games. Down the stretch, he didn't play as good, but we didn't play as good around him. We didn't play as good a defense. We didn't, obviously we talked about the running game failing us in a time of the year when the running game is critical. So can he still do some special things? Absolutely. Did he do that to his expectations? I think he'd be the first to tell you no, because Ben cares about one thing. He cares about winning a Super Bowl, and he's no different than us. When it doesn't happen, he's never going to be satisfied. So hopefully, whatever team we come up with in 2021, that'll be a team that, again, we're not talking about losing a first-round playoff game.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.